Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Hey there. Good to be back.
So today we're tackling some pretty heavy topics.
Yeah, definitely weighty stuff.
But we're going to unpack them, the Sip and Talk way. Lots of perspective, maybe some surprising details, and hopefully our usual bit of back and forth.
Right.
We're diving into what's been going on with press freedom, specifically in Hong Kong and China, looking at some really compelling stories that honestly give you a lot to think about.
Exactly. We'll be talking about a major newspaper shutting down the ongoing trial of its founder, Jimmy Lai.
Right.
And then there's this really fascinating, almost darkly funny situation with a mainland spouse who got deported from Taiwan.
Oh, yeah. That was something else.
Our mission, as always, is just to lay out the facts, understand the context, and, leave you with some food for thought. We're not taking sides here, just exploring the objective realities as best we can.
So grab your drink, get comfortable. We're about to explore how these events might signal some bigger shifts in press freedom and, individual expression. Okay, let's get into this first story. Imagine this. A newspaper, super popular, right? So influential that when its very last issue came out, people were lining up, middle of the night,
right, yeah,
like blocks long, just to buy a copy. Millions of copies sold. It's like a rock concert ticket drop, but, way more serious.
It really is a powerful image, isn't it? And we're talking about Hong Kong's Apple Daily back in June 2021.
Exactly.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Apple Daily wasn't just, a newspaper.
Right. More than that.
Way more. Jimmy Lai founded it in 1995, just before the Hong Kong handover. And its whole identity, its DNA, was basically built around keeping an eye on the government, defending freedoms. It was openly anti-communist, very pro-democracy, and, interestingly, quite supportive of Taiwan's independence movements, too. It really carved out this unique, very outspoken space.
And that outspokenness, that identity, is basically what led to its end, right? A really sudden, dramatic end. We're not talking about, like, a slow decline because of bad business or the internet taking over. This was...
No. This was a forced closure. June 24, 2021, Apple Daily prints its last paper.
And not because they were broke.
Not at all. It was a direct result of the Hong Kong police using the new national security law powers, raiding their offices, not once, but twice.
Twice. Wow.
Yeah. Arresting executives, freezing the company's money, all their assets.
So they literally couldn't operate.
Exactly. Couldn't pay staff, couldn't pay printers. Game over. And the churches. Collusion with foreign forces and incitement to subversion.
Deterrence under that law.
Huge. So let's be clear. This wasn't a business failure. It was unequivocally a political closure. The government shut it down.
Okay, so the government shuts down this major paper.
Yeah.
How did Beijing react? What was the official story coming out of mainland China?
Oh, they didn't try to hide their feelings. State media, like the People's Daily Global Times, they openly celebrated. Like victory laps.
It's celebrated.
Absolutely. They called Apple Daily things like representative anti-China and disruptive media. They hailed the closure as a major rectification, like they were fixing something wrong, and a significant achievement of the national security law.
So zero ambiguity.
None. They directly linked Jimmy Lai and the paper to Taiwan independence and, quote, U.S. imperialists. They framed it as basically stamping out subversive forces. It wasn't presented as just law enforcement. It was a win in an ideological battle.
Wow. Okay, so if they're linking it to Taiwan independence, what kind of signal does that send across the strait to Taiwan itself?
That's a really crucial question because for Beijing, Jimmy Lai wasn't just some Hong Kong critic. He was like the eye of the storm. He openly supported Taiwan, went to Tiananmen Square memorials. Apple Daily itself constantly backed liberal views in Taiwan, criticized the CCP system.
Right.
So the message, both inside China and definitely aimed at Taiwan, is pretty stark. It's basically, look, it doesn't matter where you are, media, private citizen, whatever. If you cross our red line, we can reach you. We can shut you down.
Like a warning shot.
A very clear warning shot, especially designed to discourage similar support for independence or even just criticism coming out of Taiwan, showing the reach of their power.
Okay, speaking of things disappearing, this is where it gets kind of weird, almost Kafka-esque. What about just, like, owning an old copy of Apple Daily? Say you save that last issue. Is that illegal now?
It's a great question, and surprisingly, no, there's no specific law saying owning Old Apple daily is illegal.
Okay, so technically fine.
Technically. But, and this is a big but, there's this massive chilling effect in both Hong Kong and the mainland.
Oh, the chilling effect.
Exactly. In Hong Kong, while owning it isn't banned, if you started, say, publicly collecting them or handing them out, you could potentially face vague charges like spreading seditious publications or supporting subversion.
Vague charges, meaning?
Meaning it depends on interpretation, intent, context. We saw a bookstore owner get questioned by National Security Police back in 2022 just for selling Apple Daily-related stuff.
So it's not illegal until they decide it is, based on what you do with it or what they think you intend.
That's pretty much it. It's like you're fine unless you're not. And the not can be decided later. That ambiguity is the real tool, right? It makes people censor themselves.
Yeah, you don't know where the line is, so you stay far away from it.
Precisely. And in mainland China, even tougher. The Apple Daily website, all its content, blocked for ages by the Great Firewall.
Right.
If you somehow got a physical copy from outside, maybe traveling, and customs found it, or someone saw it, big risk. You could be accused of having illegal publications, especially if it mentions Tiananmen or Hong Kong independence or Taiwan independence. Those are huge red flags.
Got it. So owning it isn't the crime, but possessing content deemed subversive definitely is.
Basically, yes. The content is the problem.
Okay, so the analysis we looked at asks this really blunt question. Is Hong Kong dead? Now, is that just, an emotional reaction, hyperbole, or is there something real behind that statement?
It's a heavy phrase, for sure. And people like the commentator Yu, even Anson Chan, a former top Hong Kong official, have used it. It's not just hyperbole.
Okay.
From the perspective of institutions, freedom of speech, it's pointing to what many see as the complete breakdown of one country, two systems, that promise of autonomy.
Right, the framework.
Yeah, we saw Apple Daily go down, but then other independent outlets like Stand News, Citizen News, they just closed voluntarily out of fear.
The chilling effect again.
Exactly. The national security law itself kind of bypasses normal legal procedures. Education, curricula are changing, removing mentions of things like Tiananmen, adding national security education.
Reshaping the narrative.
Totally. Political participation, opposition figures disqualified, the whole election system rewritten to ensure only Beijing-approved patriots can run. Even freedom of movement is restricted for dissidents.
So it's not just a feeling, it's documented, systemic changes across the board.
Yes. It's about fundamental shifts in the core institutions and freedoms that defined Hong Kong for decades.
How did the rest of the world, especially places like Taiwan that value similar freedoms, react to the Apple Daily closure specifically?
The international reaction was pretty strong, mostly condemnation. The U.S., the U.K., the EU, they all called it a major blow to press freedom. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken called it a chilling, dark moment for journalism.
Strong words.
Very. And Taiwan was particularly vocal. President Tsai Ing-wen expressed solidarity with Jimmy Lai, with the people of Hong Kong. There were even Taiwanese lawmakers suggesting they invite Apple Daily journalists to set up shop in Taiwan.
Did that happen?
No, it didn't quite materialize, but the gesture was significant, and Taiwanese netizens, ordinary people, they started archiving old Apple Daily papers online, scanning covers, like a grassroots preservation effort.
Wow, like keeping the memory alive digitally.
Exactly, an act of solidarity and maybe defiance against censorship.
It really is something when you think about it. A newspaper, just ink on paper, being seen as such a national threat
Yeah.
that it has to be completely dismantled.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is the newspaper really that powerful? Or is the government feeling maybe a little fragile if words scare it that much? Someone said collecting an old newspaper now takes more secrecy than hiding a gun.
That quote really hits home, doesn't it?
It really does. It says a lot about the state of things. Okay, so building right on the Apple Daily story, we have to talk about Jimmy Lai himself. His situation is, it's central to this whole narrative, and it really puts a spotlight on the human rights aspect.
Absolutely. And what's just staggering is the sheer length, the complexity of his trial. It officially started back in December 2023.
Right.
And as of, March 2025, he's already been in court for over 52 days of testimony, just testimony.
52 days, it's intense, it feels deliberately slow.
It certainly seems protracted, yeah. It's a very long legal battle, which, can serve different purposes, wearing down the defendant, managing international attention, setting precedents under the new law.
So what's the timeline? When might we actually see a verdict in this marathon trial?
Well, the latest is that closing arguments are scheduled for August 14th, 2025. That date already got pushed back.
Okay.
And then the judges are looking at maybe earliest October 2025 for a verdict announcement. So still quite a ways off.
And remind us, what are the charges again?
2 very serious ones under the national security law: collusion with foreign forces and publishing seditious material.
And the penalty for those?
Potentially.
All right.
Life imprisonment.
Life for publishing and collusion, which seems broadly defined.
Extremely broadly defined, yeah. It's a very heavy sentence hanging over him, especially considering these are essentially charges related to speech and journalism.
Now, what about his defense? I remember reading he wanted to bring in a lawyer from the UK.
Yes, that's a really key point regarding fairness.
Yeah.
He wanted to hire Timothy Owen, a very senior, well-respected UK lawyer.
Right.
But that was blocked. Back in 2022, they said he needed the chief executive's approval, which is, political interference right there. He appealed it all the way up, but Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal rejected his final appeal on that in March 2025. So no UK lawyer.
Wow. So his choice of representation was ultimately denied by the system.
Exactly. And that whole saga really fueled international concerns about, is the judiciary still independent in Hong Kong? Is this a fair trial?
And outside the courtroom, what's his actual situation? He's been detained this whole time for years now.
For over 1,500 days, that's more than 4 years, since December 2020.
1,500 days.
Most of it reportedly in 23 to 24-hour solitary confinement.
That's incredibly harsh, especially for someone his age.
Extremely harsh. He's 77 years old. He's diabetic. Reports say he's lost a lot of weight, has very limited outdoor time, even restrictions on religious visits. His health is a major, major concern for human rights groups.
I can imagine. Solitary confinement alone is psychologically brutal.
It really is. And for that long, at his age, with health issues, it's deeply worrying.
And those human rights groups, they've taken notice. Amnesty International gave him a specific designation, didn't they?
Yes, a very significant one. In October 2024, Amnesty International formally declared Jimmy Lai a prisoner of conscience.
What does that mean exactly?
It's a term Amnesty uses for people jailed purely for peacefully expressing their beliefs. Non-violent political prisoners. It's a strong condemnation of his imprisonment.
So Amnesty is calling for his release?
Unequivocally. Immediate unconditional release, drop all charges. They point to all sorts of problems with the trial. It's not fully public. He's denied bail. His lawyers face restrictions. They called it a shameful judicial rollback.
Strong language again.
Yeah.
Is it just Amnesty or is there a wider international reaction?
Oh, it's much wider. You've got UN human rights experts speaking out, foreign ministries, UK, US, EU countries demanding his release, expressing alarm.
So governments are involved.
Definitely. Lots of international rights groups, too. And recently, remember that group of 22 former prisoners, people who've been jailed for their beliefs? They collectively urged the UK Prime Minister to take direct action.
So pressure is building. How is this playing out diplomatically? Especially with the U.S. President Trump is back in office now in 2025. Is Lai's case becoming like a diplomatic football?
It seems to be. The U.S. Consul General in Hong Kong has publicly stated that this kind of long-term imprisonment for peaceful expression is worrying. And yes, President Trump himself has said he plans to put the Jimmy Lai case on the table in talks with China.
So it's explicitly on the agenda.
It appears so, making it a potential bargaining chip, or at least a major point of friction. The UK government is also under pressure, especially from those former prisoners, to use, quote, commercial terms, basically, economic leverage to push for his release, since he's a British citizen. Some critics feel the UK hasn't been forceful enough.
Right. Criticize their strategy as too passive.
Exactly. So, yeah, he's really become this symbol, a man caught in the middle of these huge geopolitical tensions. His personal fate is tied up in these much bigger struggles over governance, freedom, and international relations.
It's an incredible weight for one person to carry.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We're moving from these high-profile cases to something maybe more relatable, but just as illuminating, I think. This story involves someone named Xiao.
Right, Xiao. She was a mainland spouse living in Taiwan.
And her story is like a real-world lesson in different speech environments.
Exactly. It's a fascinating case study. So she's living in Taiwan, but back in April 2025, she gets deported, sent back to her home province, Guizhou, in mainland China.
Why was she deported?
Because she'd been pretty active on social media while in Taiwan, advocating for unification by force, pushing for China to take Taiwan militarily.
Okay, that's definitely a controversial stance to take in Taiwan.
Very. And Taiwan's immigration authorities decided that crossed a line, revoked her residency, sent her back.
So she's outspoken in Taiwan, gets sent back to China, and then what happens? Does she quiet down?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting and kind of ironic. Less than 3 months after getting back home, around June 26th, she posts a video on Douyin, which is like China's TikTok.
Okay. What was this video about? More unification talk.
No, not at all. This time, she was complaining about her local village committee.
Ah, a local issue.
Totally local. Her village got flooded because of a nearby reservoir construction, and she was alleging the committee was withholding compensation money. Money owed for land, resettlement, crops, all that stuff.
Okay, so a legitimate grievance, it sounds like. Trying to get money she felt was owed to her community.
Right. Under Chinese law, that compensation should be paid. So she's basically trying to hold local officials accountable.
And how did that go over? What was the impact of that video?
Not well. The consequences were immediate. She reported getting a late-night phone call from the local police station.
A call from the police?
Yeah. She described it as intimidating, a warning, said it left her scared, trembling.
Wow. Just for complaining about compensation?
Apparently. And maybe unsurprisingly, her video about the compensation, it vanished from Douyin. Poof. Gone.
Deleted, of course. So, immediate pushback, police warning, video gone.
Swift and direct. Shows you the kind of monitoring that happens.
How did people react online, especially Chinese netizens, knowing her history of being so vocal in Taiwan? Did they see the irony?
Oh, big time. That's a really interesting part of this. Lots of Chinese netizens jumped on it, pointing out the irony. Like, why didn't you appreciate the freedom you had in Taiwan?
Right. Where she could advocate for military invasion but gets shut down for asking about flood compensation back home.
Exactly. Some speculated the village committee probably reported her for smearing them, and that's what triggered the police call.
Makes sense. Don't make local officials look bad.
Right. And the whole thing got framed by some as a perfect example of the CCP Iron Fist. You know, a reminder that even if you're seen as patriotic like she was for her unification stance, you can still get smacked down hard if you challenge local authorities or expose potential corruption.
So this leads to that sort of darkly funny question people started asking online, right? Like, did she forget she wasn't in Taiwan anymore?
Yes. That phrase went kind of viral. Humorous, but sharp.
Did she just, like, automatically assume she still had the same level of freedom to complain publicly?
Well, she probably didn't literally forget where she was. But she almost certainly underestimated how different the rules are.
How so?
In Taiwan, advocating unification by force was controversial. Got her deported eventually, but she wasn't instantly silenced or threatened by police for saying it. Back in China, complaining about compensation, a potentially valid legal claim, immediately led to that police warning and censorship. It's a totally different threshold, a different set of consequences.
So the freedom she had in Taiwan to say one thing, even if extreme, didn't translate at all to complaining about a local practical issue in China.
Precisely. It's not just less freedom, it's a different kind of restriction. In China's system, even if you have a legitimate grievance, especially if it involves criticizing officials, it can quickly get relabeled, called disturbing order or smearing the government's image, or that catch-all picking quarrels and provoking trouble, even if your complaint is factually true.
So the act of complaining publicly itself becomes the problem, regardless of the merit.
Often, yes. Exposing potential misdeeds, even if illegal by the officials, can be spun as an attack on stability or the party's image. And that justifies shutting it down. Her compensation claim might have been perfectly valid under Chinese law.
Right. If the committee was withholding funds, they were breaking the law.
Exactly. But her method, going public online, like she might have done in Taiwan, was the wrong move for the mainland context. It backfired immediately.
So it was a total miscalculation of the system she was now operating in. Like trying to use the wrong rule book for the game.
That nails it. Her strategy for rights defense just didn't work there. It's like, yeah, thinking your phone's roaming is on, but you're actually off the network entirely and wondering why nothing's loading.
That's a great analogy. This really does highlight the huge difference in free speech environments, doesn't it? It's not abstract, it's practical reality.
It really does. Her experience shows it all in miniature. You see the network censorship video gone, you see the police intimidation, the warning call, and it hints at the local power dynamics, maybe corruption, and how hard it is for ordinary people to get accountability.
And you're saying this isn't just a one-off weird story, it reflects the bigger picture.
Absolutely. It fits right into the pattern. Think about the great firewall blocking sites, the constant monitoring of platforms like WeChat, Douyin, the crackdown on human rights lawyers, the national security law in Hong Kong, surveillance systems, issues in places like Xinjiang.
Right. It's all part of the same system of control.
Exactly. Her specific case, complaining about flood money, just illustrates how that broad iron fist policy works right down at the very local level.
Okay, so back to those netizen comments, the funny but biting ones. I saw a few that were just, wow. Xiao, did you accidentally bring the Taiwan exclusive feature pack back to China's? Sorry, that's region locked.
Huh. Yeah, that one captures the tech analogy perfectly.
Or, this isn't Taiwan, this is China. Please turn off your brain's chat room.
Brutal. And the sarcastic ones really drive it home. Like, she finally found out that in Taiwan, criticizing the government gets you ignored, but in China, asking for compensation gets you in trouble.
Oof, that cuts deep.
It does, and maybe the most piercing one. You said Taiwan's freedom was chaos. Now you should be happy. No one lets you speak nonsense anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These comments, even though they're kind of humorous, they just lay bare that massive difference in basic liberties, the lived reality between the two places. It's quite stark.
Hashtag tag conclusion and call to action.
Oh, that was quite a journey through some heavy territory, wasn't it?
It really was.
From Apple Daily's closure, the symbol of Hong Kong's press freedom being extinguished, to Jimmy Lai's incredibly long, concerning legal battle.
Yeah, still ongoing.
And then Xiao's story, that unexpected, almost whiplash-inducing reality check back in mainland China.
Each one, in its own way, paints a clearer picture. A picture of press freedom, human rights, and just the very different day-to-day realities of expression in that part of the world.
Right.
We saw how a major newspaper can be silenced, not through market forces, but politics. How one person's fight can become this global symbol caught up in diplomacy. And how even a simple complaint, something totally local, can suddenly reveal these huge systemic differences, this massive gap in liberties.
Exactly. They're not just separate stories. They connect. They show patterns.
And that's really what we try to do here at Sip&Talk, right? Bring you the objective facts, different angles, the context.
Without pushing an agenda, without criticizing or discriminating against anyone. Just laying out the information so you can think critically, form your own conclusions.
Give you the tools to understand these complex situations.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it? When an old newspaper or just a citizen's video complaining about local problems can be seen as such a fundamental threat.
Yeah.
What does that say about the power officials' believed truth or even just open complaint actually holds? And what's our role in seeking understanding even when it's uncomfortable?
It really underscores why independent thinking, questioning things is just so crucial right now.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this Sip&Talk Deep Dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
And hey, remember to subscribe to Sip&Talk wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next conversation.
And also, while you're at it, check out our good friend Micky's YouTube channel, Micky to Life.
Seriously, it's great. Fun memes, music, wine tasting, cool travel vlogs.
Definitely a good way to unwind after we drag you through the heavy stuff.
Exactly. A perfect palate cleanser.
We'll catch you next time on Sip and Talk.
You go